Um, okay, what do we start with? Do we want to start? I just saw the super chat, so maybe we start with the latest in the Hunter Biden. The Hunter emails are provable because Posnarski used Gmail, which uses DKIM, which proves the authenticity of email sources and contents. Same systems that proved Donna Brazile lied. DKIM. Okay, let's start with this. What are the latest developments in the Hunter Biden? I mean, I know the broad brushstrokes ones. The authenticity of the emails have been verified or confirmed. Apparently, some of the emails show overt introductions, so to speak, and so everyone was jumping on the videos, which I think are I'm on Cernovich's side on this one. I think the videos are a useless distraction to some extent. But the emails show overt introductions being made, and now we know the authenticity of something of the kick ups, rather, like the share that the Sun is getting from these introductions going back up to somebody. Now that we know that this is all true, people have to start recognizing it and reporting on it accurately. Have there been any other meaningful developments in that?
I would say those are the two main ones. There's been some collateral ones involving the Southern District of New York and the FBI. So yeah, you're right. On multiple levels, the email's authenticity has been verified by people who are on the email list or who received the emails or who sent emails. In addition, there was a digital forensic test that confirmed the authenticity and the verification of the emails. And put it this way, from a trial perspective, these emails have been far more authenticated and verified than all kinds of things that get introduced at trial. So from a trial perspective, if we were in court, there would be no problem whatsoever getting the Hunter Biden laptop emails introduced into evidence.
And just so everybody appreciates that, when you want to introduce something into evidence in court, typically it takes either the sender or the recipient or someone involved in it who can attest to the date, the receipt, the authenticity of the document, the photo, the email.
That's exactly right.
And that is what we have now with, I'm mistaken his name, it's Bobulinski or something. And I'm not saying that to be mean, I just can't get his name, who did the interview with Tucker Carlson.
Correct. And he confirmed it. There was, I believe, another individual who's confirmed it. And then there was a digital forensic expert who also confirmed it. So by every measurement or metric for determining whether something is authentic, and authenticity is the evidentiary test if we were in court, this more than passes all of that. So that's really no longer a credible claim for the critics of the Hunter Biden evidence to try to sustain. If they made that objection in a trial, they would lose the evidentiary objection. The second component is, okay, then now we know this is for real. What does that mean? The interesting thing there is what's been new about been released. It's apparent that while Joe was very careful about never, always in cash, never in writing, apparently everybody around Joe was not so careful. Not only was Hunter emailing all the time, he was emailing high-ranking officials. He was getting lists of what people to talk to. It's a much more organized and sophisticated lobbying campaign, put it this way, than what Paul Manafort, the evidence they had against Paul Manafort engaging in foreign agent lobbying, more than they had against General Flynn's son, more than they had against the other person being charged connected to Flynn's case. In all of those instances, they had less evidence than they have against Hunter Biden. And then the third part is what you mentioned in terms of substantive evidence, that there's more evidence implicating Biden directly in it, not only receiving money from the deals, but people around him being more knowledgeable. This wasn't just a case of somebody hoping they might get access to Joe Biden. There's more and more evidence that they clearly did get access to Joe Biden and to all the things that Biden could deliver, including contact points with other individuals, more and more evidence that everything related to impeachment was really about Biden, the people connected to Biden covering up for Biden's corruption, because there's more and more evidence. What was clear to me then, but now is less able to be refuted, which is that, in fact, Burisma hired Hunter Biden to make sure that Joe Biden shut down the criminal investigation by the Ukrainian authorities into Burisma. And there's more evidence that Obama's administration helped facilitate that fact by the contacts and communications that are on the email list.
And now what I was going to ask you was time frame for this. I was talking with someone who says, "Oh, this happened after Joe left office. He was no longer VP." That's factually incorrect. This was stuff that was going on during his tenure as VP specifically.
Absolutely. In fact, it all took off while he was VP. While there had always been his family getting rich while he was a United States senator in positions like political consulting jobs and lobbying jobs and getting on bank and business boards and Amtrak deals and all that kind of jazz. Went to an entirely different level while he was vice president. Most of the most problematic aspects of this, or in fact, I'd say 90% of them, are while he was president. And now that's part one. Part two is like the Clinton Foundation. Why would anyone pay any money to any person connected to the Biden family after he leaves office, if not either to A, reward him for what he did while in office, or B, with the expectation, like the Clinton Foundation, which continued to get tons of money while Hillary had left the Secretary of State's office for the next 4 years, but it was with the anticipation that she would be elected president. And so that's the reason why Biden. I told people back in 2016 he was going to let people think he was going to run to keep the cash cow coming, and then to let people. And I thought he was actually just up until 2020 he was just doing it to keep the cash cow coming. I didn't think he would actually run. That part surprised me because of what everybody can tell with his cognitive capacity limitations, and that had clearly deteriorated over the prior 4 years. But I guarantee you, like the Clinton Foundation, if Biden loses on Tuesday, and I believe he will lose on Tuesday, but if he loses on Tuesday, you're going to see all of a sudden that cash disappear. All those jobs his brother's getting and his son is getting are going to be gone.
People don't necessarily appreciate this either, because I was reading up on how Joe made his money. They're talking about how he made $170,000 a year while he was in office, and then in the 2 years after he left, he made twice as much as he ever made while in office. And they say, oh, yeah, it was for the book. It's a book that he and his wife wrote. $8 million, I think it was either an advance or royalties. Another $3 million, I think it was, doing the math, in speaking fees arrangements after he left office, with the potential understanding that he would probably return to office at a later date. And so these people saying that this is not corruption, or this is not laundering, those might be strong words. To suggest that this is not pay to play somehow, either thanking after the fact or warming up in advance. You have to wonder how someone can go from a life in office and then make twice as much in their 2 years after they leave office than they've made in their entire lives. But going back to the kids now, or to Hunter. So my understanding is he's making introductions for Hunter to get jobs with Ukrainian oil companies. I don't know what the companies were in China, where he's making millions. I mean, if it's not tens of thousands, it's, what is it, 83,000 a month for one company. He's getting millions into his consulting firm and other companies. What are the details? You know what he was getting from China, specifically what he was getting from the Ukraine?
The Ukraine was in the millions a year. Moscow was in the millions, and then from the Moscow mayor's family. But from China, it was a potential $1 billion deal. Now that would be split up amongst various investment partners. The China one, probably it was the most potentially problematic, because some of the people he was connected to were stealing military secrets from the United States. And it appears that may have been the entire goal. The whole goal may have been for Biden's company. And this is where I do recommend people watch the Biden Dragon story on Blaze TV, available on YouTube. It's about a 45-minute documentary by Peter Schweitzer, who's one of the last investigative reporters in the country. And he'll go into detail about the China part in particular. And basically it looked like China was trying to buy influence. Certain people were trying to buy influence within the Chinese government by having influence in the U.S. government. One of them ended up being criminally prosecuted for all kinds of fraud, just like the Ukrainian people connected were accused of fraud, just as the Moscow Russian folks have been accused of fraud. So it's not just they're involved with foreign leaders or people that are foreign oligarchs, but often foreign oligarchs who had corruption problems in their own country and trying to leverage U.S. access to either mitigate that or to expand their corruption. But what's interesting is, so a couple of these people end up getting caught. And one of the ways Hunter Biden ended up early on the radar screen, though I have every reason to believe the Obama administration knew exactly what was going on, but was one of the people that gets caught. One of the first people he calls after he gets caught is he wants to put a call. He is Joe Biden's brother. And this is, a high-ranking Chinese official accused of a wide range of criminal behavior or high-ranking Chinese, quasi-oligarch that gets caught in the United States with doing involved with various activities, criminal activities, including in some cases stealing military secrets. What's interesting is magically, guess which district ends up also in control of all these cases?
I'm going to take one guess. 4 letters. SDNY.
Yes, indeed. SDNY. Just as SDNY magically ends up in control of all the corruption scandals involving Devin Archer, who are connected to Hunter Biden's business plans and activities, the people connected to the Chinese illicit activities also somehow end up getting prosecuted in the Southern District of New York. And miraculously, they managed to keep the Biden family out of it entirely, even when one of the Chinese suspects was immediately calling out to Joe Biden's brother, asking for contact points to Hunter Biden, believing clearly that he had certain political protection and connections.
The Chinese individuals who were accused in SDN, did they end up going to jail?
I believe one of them did, for sure. Yes, I think I'm doing like a 10-year sentence. But it's fascinating how all of these people, and that's where the Devin Archer case took weird turns, where you had Dan Abrams' sister, who's married to a Mueller prosecutor, oversee the trial and then set the verdict aside. And then the Second Circuit had to reinstate the verdict. And not long after that happened, Devin Archer and other people connected to it. It's probably not a coincidence that's a time frame for a lot of this information coming out. Whatever the story was with the laptop, they provided confirmation of the key allegations in that were in the laptop. So now another caveat to all this, I was talking with some folks on a little YouTube show called The Gaggle, which has people from all around the world, Irish people, Hungarians, people that are in Russia, you name it. But I was mentioning, I said, you know who would have been much more effective getting the Hunter Biden story out? Steve Bannon does a okay job, but not great. Rudy, God bless his soul. I don't know how he presented an opening statement in court, but man, he's just all over the place. So I even tried to watch his presentation. I was like, man, I just can't. It's like, he's like that old guy that just constantly changes his story about 5 minutes in. You know what I mean? Like, which can be fun, but it's not helpful for knowing a story.
I suspect he was more focused in the younger years, and now it's sort of the. No, I don't want to say Abe Simpson type meandering, but it's more storytelling now, which meanders. But I suspect
exactly. It's hard you have to go back and take notes 5 times to figure out what the heck the story is. But who would have been extremely effective, who would have been able to validate these things quickly, and who merely by the fact that he authenticated it would have been considered validated right away. The most effective person at disclosing government corruption in a way that's transparent, authentic, and effective over the past 10 years has been Julian Assange. So the fact that they indicted Julian Assange prevented WikiLeaks from being they would have been the natural source for all this. Mm-hmm. And then we would have been able to search it ourselves to figure out what's on the date in the emails. You would have had true crowdsourcing of investigative work, like what happened with the WikiLeaks emails, where a lot of information got disclosed much quicker and much more effectively. It would have been WikiLeaks has never. They have never been caught a single time putting out a false document. It's extraordinary, the authentication mechanisms they go to. So it's mighty convenient that not only did impeachment distract from all of this, it turned out the FBI had all this for over a year, knew there was potential money laundering, everything else, did nothing with it, tried to bury it, tried to hide it, knew it was authentic all along. But the fact that they got Julian Assange tied up, I told people at the time, this is done so that Assange and WikiLeaks cannot be helpful to Trump. In terms of dealing with institutional corruption. And that is, in fact, this story was 10 times less effective because Julian Assange was in prison.
I mean, it's an interesting, I would say, I am able to identify when you hypothesize. And it's an interesting theory because it would be a question of playing the long game, chess game on this one, knowing that this might have come up in 2020. So it is interesting, though, when you lose the WikiLeaks source, a platform where people can access it themselves and authenticate it themselves and crowdsource the knowledge themselves. Yeah, we're looking at Giuliani on Steven Crowder opening up a laptop. We're looking at an interview with Tucker Carlson that most people are going to not take serious. Most people who don't like Tucker Carlson or don't like that side are not going to take seriously because they're just going to call it partisan whatever. At the very least, it seemed that everyone hated Julian Assange and WikiLeaks to some extent, and those who loved him, were able to do the work that he was facilitating and had a untarnished track record as far as accuracy goes. But someone actually asked a question and I missed it, but I'm going to take a picture of it if my phone lets me. It was Isaac Castillo Oh no, he said biodynamics failed the first time. Biden doesn't need projections to tell voters what career policies will yield significant growth. That wasn't the one. The comment was, Edwin Lee, love you guys. Do you think there's enough of a case for criminal prosecution of Joe Biden if Trump stays in office? This is my question. Can't for the life of me figure out how, joking about the simulation, this happens again. It's not it's a laptop, it's emails, it's the FBI or the DOJ confirming an FBI investigation a week to the election, like Comey did last time. Why do they confirm the existence of an investigation that was opened in 2019?
I mean, my guess is that what they're trying to do is it's now CYA mode. They're trying to say that, no, we were investigating or we are investigating. The other reason they would say they're investigating is to try to shut down FOIA requests and a bunch of other things. So because as long as there's an open investigation, they don't have to actually do anything and they don't have to disclose anything about what they did or did not do. So that's my assumption about what took place and what transpired. So and I think they took out Assange not necessarily in anticipation of the Biden aspects directly. It was just that there's been nobody better outing the deep state than Julian Assange, maybe in American or world history, of consistently outing corrupt governments around the world. And they knew if you take out Assange, then something like this, if it pops up, will be nowhere nearly as effective and impactful.
Yeah, there's no question. I remember the wiki dump the last time in 2016, and just everyone on the internet had access to it and was able to do their own what's the word, promotion, publication, republication, sharing, and it was just, it's true, it's crazy. This with the absence of Assange, now that you mentioned it, the absence of WikiLeaks and the addition of the suppression on Twitter and Facebook, I mean, you have to be looking for this information in order to know it exists, and even educated people will largely be unaware of the existence, and if they're aware of the existence, largely unaware of the scope of what was involved in it. It's an interesting thing, though. If the FBI is getting scared, wants to cover their butts, is it the same type of thing? Like they're no longer as certain that Hillary's going to win and shield them post-election as they were Biden getting elected, shielding them post-election now? Like, is there internal sentiment within these institutions that it's looking more likely that it's going to be a Trump re-election and the hammer coming down on what should have been done a year ago?
I think they're uncertain, and so they're just covering themselves for the time being, and then wait and see. It's clear now that the Durham, of course, never issued a report. There are some people are saying it was going to happen the weekend before Election Day. So everybody out there, what I forecast on here for what is it now, 8 months, 9 months,
Easy.
Is that nothing was going to happen and nothing happened. And so this is why I strongly support the pardon of Julian Assange as well as Ed Snowden, but particularly Ed Snowden, because it's going to tell whistleblowers they can blow the whistle on illicit government activities and be protected. Real whistleblowers, not the fake ones like the New York Times had, where they used basically a guy that was practically an intern and pretended he was a high-ranking government official as anonymous. Turned out he's just a political hack who loves war. But someone real like Ed Snowden, who was probably the most important whistleblower in American history, other than maybe Daniel Ellsberg, but really probably more so than Ellsberg in many respects. But Julian Assange was critical to outing deep state corruption. So whatever you think about him, the reality, if you believe in and support transparency and investigative reporting into your government, the only man who has done it effectively in my lifetime has been Julian Assange. And the Hunter Biden story should remind you as to why he's so important, because the reason why half the world hasn't heard of it and the rest of them just discard it is because Assange wasn't there to make it accessible to everybody.
No, and to write it off as they did in the early stages as Russian disinformation, and then the Department of National Intelligence confirms it. And I still hear very intelligent people repeating, this is Russia disinformation. It's just like, it's the catch-all. It's just the voluntary flicking off of the switch of critical thinking in the brain. Russia disinformation. I no longer have to look at non-judgmentally at Hunter Biden as an individual. A lot of people were giving me flack last week because I said, he's the son. He's I was treating him like a child, some people said, but the reality is everybody has their problems. It's not a question of Hunter Biden's personal problems. It's a question of what was facilitated by and as a result of political connections, and how this is not the exact same accusation of the quid pro quo that they were trying to impeach Trump on steroids. It's outlandish, and it's black and white. It's undeniable for anybody who's following it. But I can say from own conversations I've had with people, large swaths of people, educated people, 1 in 10 know anything about it, which means that there's not a lot of people. There's a lot more people we can have watching the live streams. Everyone here watching has known about the legalities of the laptop and all the beautiful stuff about it. What is the political downside for Trump if he pardons Assange and Snowden? I mean, I guess
it's just the deep state hates the more than they even hate Trump, and almost all the deep state apparatus for which that the outing of Anonymous this week. For people who don't know that backstory, the New York Times put this anonymous high-ranking government official, according to them, disclosing all these terrible things that Trump was doing, and it turned out Anonymous was a nobody. It was just, but he's one of the minions of the deep state apparatus. Minions, also a great movie for it's more of a cartoon show. Doesn't relate to deep state, but just a little plug. But this guy reflects that kind of minions mindset. Just doing whatever the sort of deep state apparatus wants ideologically and politically. They hate Julian Assange. They hate Ed Snowden and all the deep states of the world combined, all the intelligence agencies, all the politicized law enforcement, all the national security apparatus or military industrial complex, whatever verbiage you want to use for them. The institutional actors who have disproportionate influence in areas of intelligence, law enforcement, and the military hate Julian Assange because of what he represents and hate Ed Snowden because of what he represents. Not just because of what they've successfully achieved, but because they represent, hey, you can act on your conscience and expose corruption in our government. You can create independent crowdsourced journalism that's outside of any editorial or censorial control and have meaningful change in the world, as Julian Assange did. That's what terrifies them about both of them. They want both of them to suffer horrific personal consequences because they don't want anyone else to ever stick their head up again. It relates to a great history professor, a great historian, the book right behind me in the left, The Contours of American History by Mr. Williams, William Appleman Williams. And the reason why it's a great text, and it's a great book all the way across the board. You can see the photo of it, is because he goes how often our foreign policy elites would be obsessed with very tiny governments and countries like Cuba, for example. But long before Cuba, there were other ones they were obsessed with because they saw them as exemplars of a different set of behavior around the world. And so they would obsess over a Panama. They obsess over some tiny little country. Like, why do you care? Because for them, they knew the example of somebody who would be willing to challenge empire, the institutional prerogatives of empire, like, say, Allende in Guatemala in the 1950s. Then if they did so, they could spread their ideology. And it's because they understand our own history. America was this little backwater that decided to rebel against its empire in the late 1700s. And before then, we didn't have a bunch of democracies around the world. Freedom of speech wasn't an idea shared around the world. Freedom of thought wasn't an idea shared around the world. Freedom of religion, sure as heck, was not an idea shared around the world. Freedom of all of the core freedoms that we consider foundational and fundamental, the right to a jury trial, the right to have bail, all of these ideas that are the right to have a jury decide your guilt or innocence, the right not to have to incriminate yourself. All of these core American rights created in America started because of the example of America. This tiny little country showed you could change the entire world. And that's what Julian Assange showed. That's what Ed Snowden showed. That's why they hate him. That's why if Trump is going to be consistent to his principles, he needs to pardon him. He's only stopped doing so to date because the deep state apparatus doesn't want it to occur.
So, I mean, hypothetically, re-election, he has much more freedom, or does he wait until last year of his second term if he's reelected?
Well, I've been telling everybody around Trump has always been very open and overt that he believes in payback. And I've been saying, look, the people that have been waging war on him for 4 years is this deep state institutional apparatus. If I was there's one way to pay those people back more than any other, and that would be to pardon Julian Assange and Ed Snowden. That would be the Bill Cristols of the world, all the corrupt actors, the Brennans, the Clappers. Hillary Clinton wanted to drone bomb Julian Assange. The best way to pay that whole corrupt apparatus that's trying to corrode corrosively the core of our democratic freedoms and institutions in America would be to pardon Julian Assange and Ed Snowden. So I think he didn't do it up until the election because he was trying a détente with his opponents. But I think once the election is over, no matter how the election goes, he should take action and pardon the two of them to pay those folks back for what they got coming.
That is actually I'm just pulling up. I love Barnes' perspective, and that is a good way to look at it. One way or the other, he's either empowered through re-election or he is declawed through non-re-election. Not declawed, but rather, what is the word when you disinhibited through not being reelected?